Financial freedom is not about quitting work. What if the real problem is not that you have to work? What if the real problem is that you cannot stop? That difference may sound small, but it changes everything. Because most people do not dream about financial freedom because they hate effort. They dream about it because they are tired of having no room. No room to breathe, no room to say no, no room to pause, no room to recover, no room to choose. They are not always trying to escape work itself. They are trying to escape dependence, and that is where the whole conversation about investing becomes much more serious than most people make it sound. Because online, financial freedom is usually sold like a fantasy. A beach, a laptop, a quiet morning, money arriving while you sleep, dividends, rental income, stocks, funds, passive income. The dream is always presented as if the goal is to never work again, but that is not the deepest goal. The deeper goal is this: to stop needing one fragile source of income to keep your entire life standing. That is the real game. Not luxury, not showing off, not pretending to be rich, not collecting financial vocabulary. The real game is transferring power, little by little, from your paycheck to your assets, from your employer to your own structure, from your body to your capital, from your time to something that can keep working when you cannot, or when you simply do not want to keep paying the same price. That is what investing is supposed to do. But most people enter the game with the wrong question. They ask, how much money do I need so I never have to work again? It is not a bad question, but it is incomplete. A better question is, how much of my life is still completely dependent on me showing up every month? That question is colder, but it is more useful, because it does not flatter you. It shows you your real position. If your entire life collapses the moment your income stops, then you are not financially free. Even if you have a good job, even if you earn well, even if you look successful, even if you own nice things, you may have income. But you do not yet have position, and position matters. Position is the difference between choosing and accepting, between negotiating and begging, between resting and panicking, between taking a calculated risk and staying trapped because you cannot afford uncertainty. That is why money, when used correctly, is not just about buying things. Money buys distance. Distance from desperation. Distance from bad decisions. Distance from humiliating situations. Distance from the need to say yes, when every part of you wants to say no. And investing is the process of turning today's surplus into tomorrow's distance. But here is the uncomfortable part. You cannot build that distance with wishful thinking. You cannot build it by watching one more video about high dividend stocks. You cannot build it by waiting for the perfect stock. You cannot build it by hoping one investment will rescue you from a life you have not redesigned. You build it with capital, and capital is brutally honest. A small amount of money can grow. It can teach you. It can start the process. It can change your psychology, but it cannot do the job of a large fortune. Not yet. This is where many people get hurt. Not by the market, by expectations. They invest a small amount. They see it move. They feel hope. They start calculating, and suddenly they ask the portfolio to do something it is not big enough to do. They want it to replace income. They want it to create freedom. They want it to calm anxiety. They want it to prove that escape is near. But the portfolio is still young. It is still small. It is still learning to stand. And asking a small portfolio to carry a full life is like asking a candle to heat a house. The candle is not useless. It has value. It gives light. It proves that fire exists. But it is not a furnace. Not yet. That is the mistake. People do not only overestimate returns. They overestimate what returns can do when the base is too small. A 10% return sounds impressive. And in percentage terms, it can be. But 10% on $1,000 is $100. 10% on $10,000 is $1,000. 10% on $1 million is $100,000. Same return, different reality. The percentage did not change. The machine changed. And this is where investing becomes less exciting, but more truthful. At the beginning, your return matters, but your contribution rate may matter more. Your income matters. Your expenses matter. Your ability to keep investing matters. Your ability to avoid destroying the plan matters. Your ability to stay consistent when the numbers are still unimpressive matters. Because early in the journey, your portfolio is not the main engine. You are. Your job, your business, your skill, your discipline, your ability to produce surplus, your ability to not spend every increase in income, that is the fuel. The portfolio is the machine. But a machine without fuel does not become powerful just because you admire it. And this is one of the quiet traps of modern financial content. It makes people focus on the machine before they have enough fuel. They spend hours searching for better investments, better stocks, better funds, better strategies, better timing, better dividend yields, better predictions. And some of that matters. But if the portfolio is still small, earning 1 or 2 extra percentage points may not change your life as much as increasing how much money you invest every month. That sounds less glamorous, but it is often the truth. If your portfolio is small, the biggest opportunity may not be finding a brilliant investment. It may be becoming a person who can invest more. That may mean earning more, spending more intentionally, eliminating waste, building a side income, improving a skill, changing jobs, charging better, creating something, selling something, reducing fixed expenses, protecting your cash flow, doing the boring, adult work that rarely goes viral. Because financial freedom is not created by intelligence alone. It is created by surplus plus time plus behavior. And behavior is where many people fail. Not because they are stupid, because they are human. They start strong. Then life happens. A bad month, a family problem, a market drop, a new desire, a comparison, a promotion, a new car, a better apartment, a relationship, a crisis, a vacation, a feeling of, I deserve this. And maybe they do. Maybe they do deserve rest. Maybe they do deserve pleasure. Maybe they do deserve a better life. But they also deserve a future where they are not trapped by every decision they made to comfort themselves in the present. That is the part nobody wants to say. Sometimes the enemy of financial freedom is not poverty. Sometimes it is emotional spending disguised as self-care. Sometimes it is lifestyle inflation disguised as progress. Sometimes it is status disguised as success. Sometimes it is exhaustion disguised as reward. And every time your life becomes more expensive without becoming more free, the target moves away. This is one of the most important ideas in the entire subject. Your financial freedom number is not only determined by how much you invest, it is also determined by how much your life costs. If your life costs $3,000 a month, your required capital is one thing. If your life costs $6,000 a month, it is a very different thing. If every increase in income becomes a permanent increase in lifestyle, your freedom gets more expensive every year. You may earn more. You may look better. You may feel more successful. But you may not be becoming freer. You may simply be becoming more expensive to maintain. And that is a dangerous kind of success, because it gives you the image of progress while keeping the structure of dependence. Better clothes, better apartment, better restaurants, better trips, better car, same fragility. Same fear, same need to keep earning, same inability to stop. That is not freedom. That is dependence with upgraded furniture. And many people live there. Not because they are bad with money in an obvious way, but because they never asked what their money was supposed to buy. They assumed money was for improving lifestyle. But money can also buy back control. And if you never decide which one matters more, your environment will decide for you. Advertising will decide. Comparison will decide. Social pressure will decide. Your tiredness will decide. Your ego will decide. And your future will pay. So before anyone asks what to invest in, there is a harder question. What kind of life are you asking your investments to support? Because an expensive life demands a large machine. A simple life demands less. A flexible life survives better. A rigid life breaks faster. This does not mean you should live miserably. That is another mistake. Financial freedom is not about hating the present. It is not about turning every pleasure into guilt. It is not about becoming cold, cheap, or joyless. A life that is only optimized for future money can become another prison. The point is not to spend nothing. The point is to stop spending unconsciously. There is a huge difference. A meaningful trip may be worth it. A tool that increases your earning power may be worth it. A dinner with someone you love may be worth it. A health decision may be worth it. A book, a course, a small comfort that truly improves your life may be worth it. But spending to numb anxiety is different. Spending to impress people is different. Spending because you feel behind is different. Spending because you are too tired to question your habits is different. That kind of spending does not just cost money. It costs future options, and options are the real currency of freedom. A person with options thinks differently. They do not have to take the first offer. They do not have to tolerate every insult. They do not have to panic when something changes. They do not have to sell at the worst moment. They do not have to say yes to every demand. They do not have to stay in places that are slowly destroying them. That is what investments can buy. Options, but only if the structure is real. Not imagined, not aesthetic, not motivational, real. And a real structure begins with knowing your numbers. This is where many people resist. They want the dream, but they do not want the arithmetic. They want the identity of being an investor, but they do not want to calculate the cost of their own life. They want financial freedom, but they cannot say clearly how much they spend in a month. That is a problem, because if you do not know the cost of your life, you cannot know the size of the machine you need. You are not planning, you are guessing. And guessing feels easier until reality sends the bill. The basic calculation is simple. Take your annual expenses. Then compare them with a conservative withdrawal rate or expected sustainable income rate. If you need $40,000 per year and you use 4% as a rough framework, you are looking at around $1 million in capital. If you use 3.5%, you need more. If your expenses are higher, the number rises. If your expenses are lower, the number falls. If you have other income, the gap becomes smaller. If you have no flexibility, the target must be stronger. The exact number changes. The principle does not. Your assets must be large enough to support your life without being drained too aggressively. That is the heart of it, not the fantasy, not the quote, not the motivational phrase. A machine large enough to support your life without breaking. And for many people, that number is much bigger than they expected. This is where the silence begins. Because the person who thought financial freedom meant buying a few dividend stocks now sees the scale. The person who thought passive income was close realizes that the income is passive only after years of very active building. The person who thought the problem was choosing the right asset realizes the problem is building enough capital. And this realization can feel discouraging. But it should not. A large number is not an insult. It is a map. It tells you where you are. It tells you what the gap is. It tells you whether your current strategy is enough. It tells you if you need more income. It tells you if your expenses are too high. It tells you if you need more time. It tells you if you should aim first for partial freedom instead of full retirement. The number is not there to shame you. It is there to stop you from lying to yourself. And that is useful, because the danger is not being far from financial freedom. The danger is being far and thinking you are close. That is when people take bad risks. They chase yield. They overconcentrate. They fall for promises. They use leverage they do not understand. They invest money they cannot afford to lose. They confuse luck with skill. They think a good year means they are ready to quit. And sometimes, the market rewards them just long enough to make the lesson more painful later. This is why adult financial thinking requires humility. Humility to admit that returns are uncertain. Humility to admit that inflation matters. Humility to admit that taxes matter. Humility to admit that sequence of returns can matter. Humility to admit that a market downturn at the wrong time can damage a withdrawal plan. Humility to admit that no asset is magic. Even dividends. Dividends feel emotionally powerful. They arrive like little paychecks. They make investing feel real. They create the sensation that your money is finally working. And they can be useful. But dividends are not magic. A company that pays dividends is not automatically better than a company that reinvests well. A high dividend can be healthy. It can also be a warning. A dividend portfolio can create income. It can also grow slowly if built without understanding. And if your capital base is small, dividend payments may motivate you, but they probably will not free you. That does not make them useless. It makes them limited. The question is not, does this pay me something? The question is, what role does this play in my structure? Growth, income, stability, liquidity, diversification. Protection? If you cannot answer that, you may not have a strategy. You may have a feeling, and feelings are expensive when they manage money. The same is true with real estate. Rental income sounds solid. A property feels real. You can touch it. You can see it. You can imagine someone paying you every month. That is why many people trust it more than stocks. And real estate can be powerful, but it is not effortless. A rental property is not just an asset. It is an operation. Vacancies, repairs, taxes, insurance, bad tenants, maintenance, legal issues, location risk, debt, interest rates, liquidity problems, time, stress. If you ignore those things, the investment looks better than it really is. Many people calculate rent, but forget friction. They say, the property brings in this much per month. But they forget repairs. They forget empty months. They forget management. They forget deterioration. They forget paperwork. They forget the emotional cost of dealing with problems, and then they call it passive. It may be profitable, but it is not magic. Again, the asset is not the point. The structure is the point. A good asset in a bad structure can hurt you. A boring asset in a solid structure can help you. Financial freedom is not built by falling in love with assets. It is built by understanding roles. What does this investment do? What risk does it add? What risk does it reduce? When will I need this money? How liquid is it? What happens in a bad year? What happens if income stops? What happens if inflation stays high? What happens if I am wrong? That last question may be the most important. What happens if I am wrong? A serious investor asks that. A gambler avoids it, because the gambler needs certainty to feel brave. The investor builds systems that can survive being partly wrong. That is maturity. And maturity is not exciting. But it is profitable, not always immediately, not always visibly, not always in a way that gives you a story to tell. But over time, maturity protects the machine. It stops you from confusing a good market with personal genius. It stops you from confusing a drop with the end of the world. It stops you from confusing activity with progress. It stops you from asking your portfolio to heal emotions. It was never built to heal. That last part matters, because many people do not invest from strategy. They invest from pressure. Pressure to escape. Pressure to catch up. Pressure to prove something. Pressure to stop feeling behind. Pressure to compensate for years where they did not start. Pressure to become free fast because their current life feels too heavy. And pressure can push you to begin. That is useful. But pressure can also make you careless. It can make you believe the person who promises a shortcut. It can make you take risks that are not aligned with your real tolerance. It can make you overestimate your ability to stay calm. It can make you turn investing into a rescue fantasy. And the market is a terrible place to look for rescue. Because the market does not know your story. It does not know you are tired. It does not know you deserve a better life. It does not know you want to leave your job. It does not know you are trying to help your family. It does not know that this money matters to you. The market does not reward emotional need. It rewards structure, patience, risk-taking, discipline, and sometimes luck. That is why you need to enter with a plan, not a wound. A wound can give energy, but a plan gives direction. And financial freedom requires both energy and direction. One without the other is dangerous. Energy without direction becomes chaos. Direction without energy becomes theory. The goal is to turn your dissatisfaction into construction. Not into gambling, not into resentment, not into fantasy. Construction. That means building a machine that can eventually carry more and more of your life. But before it carries your whole life, it must carry small pieces. This is another place where people lose motivation. They look at the full retirement number and feel defeated. $1 million, $2 million, $5 million. The number depends on the person, the country, the lifestyle, the currency, the desired safety margin. But whatever the number is, it can feel enormous. And when something feels enormous, people often make one of two mistakes. They either give up, or they take excessive risk to close the gap quickly. Both reactions are understandable. Both can be damaging. There is a third option. Break freedom into levels, because financial freedom is not only a final destination. It is a series of expanding margins. First, you stop living completely paycheck to paycheck. That is freedom level 1. Then you build an emergency fund. That is not glamorous, but it is power. Then you eliminate destructive debt. That is power 2. Then your investments can cover 1 week of life. Then 1 month, then 3 months, then a year, then a basic expense, then rent, then food, then half your life, then most of your life, and eventually, maybe all of it. Each level matters, because each level reduces dependence. You may not be free yet, but you are less trapped, and less trapped is not a small thing. A person with 6 months of expenses saved is not living the dream. But they are not in the same position as a person with 0. A person whose investments can cover 1 year of expenses is not fully retired. But they can think differently. They can negotiate differently. They can survive differently. They can make choices with less panic. That is why partial freedom is not a consolation prize. It is the path. The internet loves the final transformation. The dramatic quit. The retirement announcement. The I left my job forever story. But the real transformation often happens earlier, in silence. The first time you realize an emergency would not destroy you. The first time you realize you could leave a bad job and survive. The first time your investments make more in a month than you used to save in several months. The first time a market drop hurts, but does not break your plan. The first time you see your paycheck not as the whole source of life, but as fuel for something larger. Those moments change identity, and identity is a major part of this, because investing consistently is not just a financial act. It is a statement about who controls your future. Every time you invest intentionally, you are saying, not everything I earn will disappear into the present. Some of it will become power later. That is a very different way to live. Most people earn, spend, recover, repeat. Earn, spend, recover, repeat. The month ends, the cycle restarts, their labor evaporates into bills, impulses, obligations, and small comforts. Again and again. There is no machine, only motion. And motion can feel like life, but it may just be repetition. Investing interrupts that repetition. It says, a piece of this month will not die this month. A piece of this effort will keep working. A piece of this income will move from consumption into ownership. That is the psychological shift. You stop being only a worker. You start becoming an owner of small pieces of productive systems. Small at first, almost invisible, but real. And over time, those pieces can begin to matter, but only if they remain. This is where time enters. Time is not magic by itself. Time multiplies what survives. If you invest for 6 months and quit, time cannot help much. If you change strategy every time you feel bored, time cannot compound your indecision. If you sell every time the market falls, time cannot reward what you do not hold. If you spend every increase in income, time cannot build capital that never arrives. People talk about compound interest as if it is automatic. It is not. Compound interest needs something to compound. Money, returns, reinvestment, years, and behavior stable enough to let the process breathe. That last part is the hard one. Behavior. Anyone can understand the idea. Few people can live it. Because living it means doing ordinary things long after the excitement is gone. It means investing when nobody is impressed. It means saving when you would rather reward yourself. It means staying calm when others panic. It means staying humble when others celebrate. It means not letting one good year rewrite your risk tolerance. It means not letting one bad year destroy your patience. It means building when the progress still looks small. That is why the early years are so important. They are not only financial years, they are training years. A small portfolio teaches you how you react. Do you panic when it falls? Do you check it too often? Do you want to sell after every headline? Do you buy only when everyone is excited? Do you feel smart after a gain? Do you feel ashamed after a loss? Do you compare constantly? Do you confuse volatility with failure? These reactions matter. Because if you cannot emotionally handle a small machine, a large machine may not make you free. It may make you unstable. A 10% drop on $1,000 is $100. A 10% drop on $100,000 is $10,000. A 10% drop on $1 million is $100,000. Same percentage, different emotional weight. This is why wealth requires emotional capacity, not just ambition. Many people want a large portfolio, but they have not trained the nervous system that must live with one. When the numbers become larger, every movement feels louder. A normal market fluctuation can look like a disaster. A good month can feel like genius. A bad month can feel like punishment. And if your identity is tied to those movements, the portfolio will control you. So part of the journey is learning to separate yourself from the screen. The portfolio is not your worth. A red day is not your failure. A green day is not your superiority. The market is not a judge of your character. It is a pricing mechanism full of human fear, greed, expectations, liquidity, uncertainty, and time. If you make it personal, you suffer more than necessary. And suffering leads to bad decisions. This is why rules matter. Rules are not there because you are weak. Rules are there because you are human. You need rules for contributions, rules for emergency funds, rules for concentration, rules for when to rebalance, rules for how often to review, rules for what you will not buy, rules for how much risk one idea can represent, rules for when you do nothing, especially when you do nothing. Doing nothing is underrated. In investing, doing nothing can be a disciplined act. Not neglect, not laziness, discipline. Because the market will constantly invite you to react. News, predictions, crashes, rallies, influencers, fear, excitement, new products, new narratives, new emergencies, new reasons to believe this time is different. If you respond to everything, you become a leaf in the wind. Moved by every headline, moved by every mood, moved by every person who sounds confident. And confidence is not evidence. That sentence is important. Confidence is not evidence. The financial world is full of confident voices. Some are knowledgeable. Some are lucky. Some are selling. Some are delusional. Some are simply repeating what worked recently. If you confuse confidence with truth, you will be manipulated. You need your own framework, not to ignore everyone, but to stop being carried by everyone. A framework asks, what is my goal? What is my time horizon? What is my risk tolerance? What is my liquidity need? What role does this investment play? What happens if I am wrong? How much can this hurt me? What is the tax impact? What is the opportunity cost? Does this bring me closer to freedom or just closer to excitement? That final question is powerful. Does this bring me closer to freedom or just closer to excitement? Because many financial choices are exciting but not liberating. A risky trade can be exciting. A trending stock can be exciting. A high-yield promise can be exciting. A new coin can be exciting. A complex strategy can be exciting. But excitement is not the same as progress. Progress is when your structure becomes stronger, when your dependence decreases, when your margin increases, when your ability to withstand life improves, when your assets can carry more of your expenses, when your future self becomes less exposed. That is progress. Sometimes progress looks boring, and that is fine. A boring plan that works is better than an exciting plan that constantly needs rescue. This is where some people resist. They say, but I do not want to wait 30 years. Understandable. Nobody wants to feel trapped for decades, but the answer to that frustration is not necessarily higher risk. It may be increasing income. It may be reducing unnecessary fixed costs. It may be building a business. It may be developing a skill. It may be creating content. It may be buying assets consistently. It may be combining active income with investment income. It may be aiming for partial independence first. There are many ways to accelerate, but acceleration must not be confused with recklessness. A faster car still needs brakes. A faster financial plan needs stronger risk control. Otherwise, speed becomes danger. And many people who say they want acceleration are actually asking for a miracle. A miracle that lets them keep the same habits, same income, same spending, same impatience, same emotional patterns, and still arrive faster. That is not acceleration. That is denial. True acceleration asks something from you. It asks you to become more capable, more disciplined, more strategic, more valuable, more honest, more patient, more willing to face numbers without drama. And this is why financial freedom is uncomfortable. Because it reveals you. It reveals your priorities. It reveals what you do with extra money. It reveals whether you can delay gratification. It reveals whether you inflate your life to impress people. It reveals whether you use spending to treat stress. It reveals whether you can stay with a plan when it stops being new. It reveals whether you want freedom enough to build it, not just imagine it. That can sting, but it is useful. Useful truths often sting before they help. Now, let us look at the retirement number again, but from another angle. When someone calculates the capital needed to live from investments, the number can feel like a wall. But the number is also a mirror. If the number is too high, you have 4 major levers. You can invest more. You can earn more. You can spend less without lowering real quality of life. Or you can create other income streams so your portfolio does not have to cover everything. That last lever is underrated. You do not always need your investments to pay for 100% of your life immediately. If you can build a small business, freelance income, consulting income, content income, rental income, professional income, or any other flexible source, the portfolio only has to cover the gap. That can change the equation. This is why the all-or-nothing retirement fantasy is sometimes unhelpful. It makes people think freedom means zero work. But for many people, the most realistic and powerful goal is not zero work. It is optional work, work you choose, work you can leave, work you can reduce, work that is not the only pillar holding your life. That version of freedom may arrive earlier, and it may be healthier, because some people do not actually want to do nothing. They want to stop being trapped. They want meaningful work. They want control over schedule. They want dignity. They want to build something of their own. They want time for family. They want energy for health. They want to stop being afraid of every institutional decision above them. That kind of freedom does not always require never working again. It requires a different balance of power. And that balance can be built gradually. Maybe your investments cover 20% of your expenses. That already changes pressure. Maybe they cover basic needs, while work covers lifestyle. Maybe they cover rent. Maybe they cover health costs. Maybe they cover 1 year of runway so you can change careers. Maybe they give you the courage to reject a toxic environment. That is real. Not final, but real. And real partial freedom is better than imaginary total freedom. This matters because people often abandon the path when they realize full retirement is far away. But they could have built a lot of power before full retirement. They just did not value it. Do not make that mistake. Measure dependence decreasing, not only retirement arriving. If last year you could survive 1 month without income, and this year you can survive 6, that is progress. If last year you invested nothing, and this year you invest every month, that is progress. If last year every raise disappeared, and this year half of it becomes capital, that is progress. If last year you panicked during volatility, and this year you followed your plan, that is progress. If last year you did not know your expenses and this year you know your numbers, that is progress. Progress is not always spectacular, but it compounds too. The danger is dismissing it because it does not look like the final dream. Do not despise the early stages. They are where the machine learns to exist. Now, we need to talk about inflation more directly, because inflation is not just a technical variable. It is a silent thief of confidence. It makes old numbers lie. A monthly amount that feels sufficient today may not be sufficient later. A retirement target calculated without inflation can become a trap. A portfolio that grows in nominal terms may still lose purchasing power if returns do not exceed rising costs. This is why financial freedom cannot be built only around today's expenses. It must include adjustment. If your plan assumes your life will cost the same forever, the plan is fragile. If it assumes investment returns will be smooth, it is fragile. If it assumes taxes will never matter, it is fragile. If it assumes you will never have major health costs, it is fragile. If it assumes you will always be able to reduce expenses easily, it may be fragile. The point is not to become paranoid. The point is to respect reality. A good plan has margin. Margin for inflation, margin for bad years, margin for mistakes, margin for uncertainty, margin for being human. Without margin, even a good plan can fail under pressure. And margin comes from multiple places. Lower fixed expenses, more capital, flexible spending, emergency reserves, diversified assets, additional income streams, insurance where appropriate, tax awareness, a willingness to adjust. That is why the best financial plan is not only the one with the highest expected return. It is the one that can survive real life. Real life is messy. A spreadsheet is clean. Do not confuse them. A spreadsheet does not get tired. A spreadsheet does not have family emergencies. A spreadsheet does not panic during a crash. A spreadsheet does not get sick. A spreadsheet does not make impulse purchases after a hard week. A spreadsheet does not compare itself to strangers. You do. So the plan must be designed for you, not for a perfect robot. This is why personal finance is personal. But not in the shallow way people say it. It is personal because your behavior is part of the math. Your emotions are part of the risk. Your habits are part of the return. Your identity is part of the strategy. If you ignore that, you are not being rational. You are pretending to be rational while leaving out the most unpredictable variable. You. That is not an insult. It is a design requirement. Build a plan that protects you from your weaker moments. Because they will come. The tired version of you. The scared version of you. The euphoric version of you. The jealous version of you. The impatient version of you. The version of you that wants to prove something. The version of you that wants relief now. A serious plan must survive all of them. That is why automatic contributions can help. Why clear rules can help. Why keeping some liquidity can help. Why not overchecking can help. Why diversification can help. Why writing down your strategy can help. Why avoiding money you need soon for risky assets can help. Not because these things are glamorous. Because they reduce self-sabotage. And self-sabotage is one of the biggest hidden costs in investing. People talk about expense ratios, taxes, fees, inflation. All important. But emotional mistakes can be more expensive than all of them. Selling low, buying from hype, concentrating too much, using leverage poorly, abandoning a plan, stopping contributions, spending every raise, trying to recover losses quickly. Those mistakes can destroy years. So, when you think about living from investments, do not only ask, what asset should I buy? Ask, what behavior must I repeat? Because assets matter, but repeated behavior builds the machine. A single great investment may help, but a repeatable system changes your life. And repeatable systems are usually simple enough to survive boredom. That is another underrated principle. If your plan is too complicated to keep doing for years, it may fail. If it requires constant attention, it may fail. If it depends on perfect timing, it may fail. If it depends on you being emotionally strong every day, it may fail. Designed for ordinary days, not heroic days. Your financial life will have more ordinary days than heroic ones, and the plan must work on those days too. Especially on those days. The ordinary days are where financial freedom is actually built, not in the dramatic moments, not when the market is exploding, not when everyone is talking about the next big opportunity, not when you feel inspired, not when a video makes you feel unstoppable. It is built on the days when nothing special happens. The day you make the contribution anyway. The day you do not buy something just to calm your stress. The day you check your expenses without lying to yourself. The day you keep the job you do not love, because, for now, it is funding your exit. The day you learn a skill instead of complaining that income is not enough. The day you let the machine grow quietly. No applause, no transformation scene, no cinematic music. Just one more action that gives your future a little more oxygen. That is why financial freedom is less like winning a lottery and more like building a bridge. At first, the bridge does not reach the other side. It looks useless. You are still standing where you started. You still have to work. You still have bills. You still feel pressure. You still depend on income. But every piece you add extends the bridge. And the mistake is judging the bridge before it is finished. People put down the first few pieces and say, "This is not taking me anywhere." Of course, it is not taking you anywhere yet. It is still being built. The real question is not whether the bridge works today. The question is whether you are adding pieces in the right direction. That is the mindset shift. A small portfolio is not failure. A small portfolio with no plan may be failure. A small portfolio that keeps growing, keeps learning, keeps getting funded, keeps surviving volatility is not failure. It is construction, and construction has stages. The first stage is awareness. You stop treating money as something that simply arrives and disappears. You start seeing it as energy. Energy that can be consumed. Energy that can be wasted. Energy that can be stored. Energy that can be turned into assets. Energy that can buy future choices. This stage can be uncomfortable because it removes innocence. You can no longer say, "I do not know where my money went." You start knowing. And once you know, every choice becomes more honest. The second stage is stabilization. This is not exciting, but it is essential. You reduce destructive debt. You build emergency reserves. You stop living so close to the edge that every unexpected expense becomes a crisis. You create basic order. This is where many people want to skip ahead. They want to invest aggressively while still being financially fragile. But fragility changes behavior. A fragile person cannot stay calm. A fragile person sells under pressure. A fragile person uses credit badly. A fragile person turns small emergencies into financial setbacks. So before the machine becomes powerful, the base must become stable. The third stage is accumulation. This is where you begin feeding the machine regularly, not randomly. Not only when you feel motivated, regularly, a monthly contribution, a percentage of income, a raise partially converted into investment, a bonus not fully consumed, a side income directed toward assets. The machine begins to receive fuel, and at first, the fuel matters more than the machine's output. This can be frustrating. You invest, and the returns look small. You add money, and the account still does not look impressive. You compare yourself to people with much larger numbers. You wonder if you started too late. You wonder if the whole thing is too slow. But this is the stage where you must understand the assignment. Your job is not to be impressed. Your job is to build. The fourth stage is acceleration. This happens when income, discipline, and time begin to work together. Your contributions become larger. Your portfolio begins generating returns that matter more in absolute terms. Reinvestment starts to show. Market movements become more meaningful. The machine begins to participate. It no longer just sits there waiting for your deposits. It starts adding its own force. This stage can feel powerful, but it is also dangerous because when the machine starts moving, people often get emotional. They become overconfident. They increase risk. They think they have figured it out. They forget that good years do not cancel risk. They forget that volatility can return. They forget that the same machine that lifts can shake. So acceleration requires humility. The fifth stage is optionality. This is where the portfolio may not fully support your life, but it changes your choices. You can leave a toxic job. You can reduce hours. You can take time to build a business. You can negotiate with more confidence. You can survive a period without income. You can say no. This stage is extremely valuable. And many people do not recognize it because they are obsessed with full retirement. But optionality is freedom in practical form. It is not the end, but it is power. The sixth stage is sustainability. This is where your assets can carry a large part, or all, of your life. At this point, the question changes. It is no longer, how do I grow this as fast as possible? It becomes, how do I protect the source while using it wisely? That is a different game. Accumulation and withdrawal are not the same. When you are accumulating, market drops can be opportunities if you have time and income. When you are withdrawing, market drops can be dangerous if you have to sell assets at bad prices to fund your life. This is why retirement planning is not only about reaching a number, it is about designing a withdrawal strategy that can survive bad timing. Because the order of returns matters. A portfolio that averages a certain return over 30 years can still produce very different outcomes depending on when the bad years arrive. Bad years early in retirement can hurt more than bad years later. Why? Because if you withdraw during declines, you may reduce the number of assets that can participate in recovery. You are not just watching the machine fall. You are taking parts out while it is damaged. That is why cash reserves, flexible spending, diversified income sources, and conservative withdrawal assumptions can matter. Not because they are exciting, because they protect the machine at the worst moments. And this brings us to a deeper idea. Financial freedom is not the absence of risk. It is the intelligent management of dependence. You will never remove all risk. If you hold cash, inflation is a risk. If you hold stocks, volatility is a risk. If you hold bonds, interest rates and inflation can be risks. If you hold real estate, liquidity, maintenance, tenants, and location are risks. If you rely on a job, employment risk exists. If you rely on a business, customer risk exists. If you rely on one country, currency and political risk may exist. There is no place where risk disappears. There are only places where risk changes shape. So the goal is not to find a risk-free life. The goal is to stop being exposed to one single point of failure. That is what a strong financial structure does. It does not make you untouchable. It makes you harder to break. And harder to break is a serious form of freedom. Now, let us talk about one of the most seductive ideas, passive income. The phrase is powerful because it promises the one thing tired people crave: income without exhaustion. Money without constant effort. A system that works without your body being present. There is nothing wrong with wanting that. In fact, it is rational. If all your income requires your active labor, your life has a ceiling and a vulnerability. But the problem is that people often hear passive and imagine easy. Those are not the same. Passive income often requires active construction. Years of saving. Years of investing. Years of building a business system. Years of acquiring assets. Years of learning. Years of correcting mistakes. Years of resisting bad decisions. The income may become less active later, but the building is not passive. The building is active, sometimes intensely active. That is why the phrase, "make your money work for you," can be misleading. Your money can work. But first, you may have to work to create enough money, and then work to protect it, and then work to understand where it belongs, and then work to not destroy it emotionally. So yes, make your money work. But do not forget the order. You build the worker before you retire the builder. That means the early phase of financial freedom is not glamorous. It is not even always enjoyable. It may involve saying no. It may involve learning boring things. It may involve being misunderstood. It may involve living below your maximum spending ability. It may involve using your income strategically instead of emotionally. It may involve staying patient while other people look richer. But those sacrifices should not be random. Sacrifice without direction becomes resentment. You need to know what the sacrifice is buying. It is buying future margin. It is buying optionality. It is buying a smaller dependence on fragile income. It is buying the possibility that one day your assets cover enough of your life that your decisions become cleaner. Cleaner decisions are underrated. When you have no margin, every decision is contaminated by fear. You might stay in the wrong job, accept the wrong client, keep the wrong schedule. Delay the right move. Ignore your health. Avoid difficult conversations, because you cannot afford disruption. Money does not solve every human problem, but it can remove certain forms of pressure that make people betray themselves. That is why this subject matters. It is not about greed. It is about reducing the number of situations where survival forces you to negotiate against yourself. That is dignity. And dignity is a better word than luxury. Luxury may or may not matter to you. Dignity should. Dignity is being able to say, I do not have to accept this immediately. I can think. I can wait. I have a buffer. I have options. I have assets. I have time. The phrase, I have time, may be one of the most valuable things money can buy. Because time without panic changes the quality of your thinking. A person who can wait sees opportunities differently. They can avoid forced selling. They can negotiate from strength. They can build patiently. They can choose better. They can recover from mistakes. They can let compounding work. A person who cannot wait pays penalties everywhere. Higher interest, worse deals, bad timing, emergency sales, emotional decisions, stress. That is why the emergency fund is not just cash. It is psychological oxygen. It may not produce a high return, but it can protect you from destroying higher return assets at the wrong time. Many people dislike emergency funds because they seem inefficient. They say, "Why keep cash when I could invest it?" Because life does not care about your expected return. Life sends bills when markets are down. Life creates emergencies when liquidity is inconvenient. Life does not wait for your portfolio to recover. Cash has a role, not to make you rich, to keep you from becoming fragile. Again, every piece has a role. This is how serious financial structure is built. Not by asking which asset is universally best, but by asking what role each piece plays in the whole machine. Cash for liquidity. Stocks or equity funds for long-term growth. Bonds or fixed income for stability and income, depending on context. Real estate for potential cash flow and appreciation, if understood and managed well. Skills for income growth. Businesses for scalable earning potential. Insurance for certain catastrophic risks. Spending control for lower required capital. Tax planning for efficiency. Behavioral rules for self-protection. None of these pieces is the whole answer. Together, they can become a system. And systems beat isolated hopes. Now, this does not mean everyone needs a complicated financial life. Actually, complexity can become a trap. Some people collect investments the way others collect objects. A little of everything. A stock here, a fund there, a coin there, a rental idea, a trading account, a retirement account, a savings account, a strategy from one creator, another from a different creator. At the end, the portfolio is not diversified. It is confused. Diversification means spreading risk intelligently. Confusion means owning many things without a clear reason. The difference matters. A simple, coherent structure can be stronger than a complex collection of impulses. You do not need to own everything. You need to own what fits, and what fits depends on your goal. If the goal is long-term accumulation, your structure may emphasize growth and regular contributions. If the goal is near-term stability, liquidity and lower volatility matter more. If the goal is income, cash flow matters, but so does sustainability. If the goal is leaving a job to build something, runway matters. If the goal is full retirement, withdrawal strategy and resilience matter. Strategy follows purpose. When there is no purpose, people chase trends, and trends are endless. There will always be a new narrative. Artificial intelligence, energy, real estate, crypto, dividends, commodities, small caps, emerging markets, private credit. Whatever comes next. Some narratives may be valid. Some may be overhyped. Some may create opportunities. Some may create bubbles. But if every new story pulls you away from your structure, you are not investing. You are drifting. A strong investor can study new opportunities without losing the base. That is the balance. Open-minded, but not easily hijacked. Curious, but not desperate. Willing to learn, but not addicted to novelty. This is harder than it sounds. Because novelty feels like progress. A new strategy gives energy. A new asset gives hope. A new prediction gives a sense of control. But sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is continue. Continue funding. Continue learning. Continue refining. Continue avoiding big mistakes. Continue letting time work. Continue increasing your earning power. Continue lowering unnecessary fragility. That word again, continue. Financial freedom belongs less to the person who feels motivated and more to the person who continues after motivation leaves. Now, let us return to the uncomfortable question from the beginning. What if the real problem is not that you have to work? What if the real problem is that you cannot stop? This question should not make you hate work. Work can be meaningful. Work can give structure. Work can create contribution. Work can build skill. Work can connect you to people. Work can be part of a good life. The problem is not work. The problem is compulsory dependence. When every bill, every future plan, every emergency, every month, every decision depends on your next paycheck, work becomes heavier than work. It becomes oxygen. And anything that controls your oxygen controls your behavior. That is why building assets matters. Not because assets make you superior, but because they reduce the number of things that can control you. The first asset you build may only reduce dependence a little. That is still worth it. The first emergency fund may only cover a few months. Worth it. The first investment account may look small. Worth it. The first side income may be modest. Worth it. Because every serious structure begins unimpressively. Most things that eventually change your life begin by looking too small to matter. The danger is abandoning them because they are not yet dramatic. Do not abandon the small things that are structurally correct. Feed them, measure them, improve them, protect them. Give them time. That is how machines become large. Now, there is a final psychological trap we need to name. The moving finish line. A person says, "When I have this amount, I will feel safe." Then they approach it, and suddenly the mind moves the target. Now they need more, then more, then more. Some of that is rational. Inflation exists. Life changes. Safety margins matter. But sometimes the target moves because the person never defined enough. They are not building freedom anymore. They are chasing emotional certainty, and emotional certainty may never arrive. No amount of money can fully remove uncertainty. A larger portfolio can reduce certain risks, but it cannot guarantee a painless life. If you expect money to eliminate fear completely, you will keep needing more. Financial freedom requires a definition of enough, not a careless definition, not a naive one, a serious one. Enough for your life. Enough for your risks. Enough for your values. Enough for your desired flexibility. Enough to stop sacrificing the present endlessly to a future that keeps moving away. Without a definition of enough, wealth can become another treadmill. A richer treadmill, but still a treadmill. This is why the question, "How much do I need?" must be paired with another question, "What is this money for?" If the answer is only more, the machine will never finish. If the answer is more control over my time, you can measure that. If the answer is the ability to leave toxic work, you can measure that. If the answer is basic expenses covered, you can measure that. If the answer is a 1-year runway to build a business, you can measure that. If the answer is retirement at a certain age, you can measure that. If the answer is never needing a salary again, you can measure that too. But define it. Otherwise, the goal becomes fog, and fog is impossible to reach. A clear number with a clear purpose creates direction, and direction reduces emotional noise. You may still feel fear, but at least you know what you are building. You may still face setbacks, but you know what to adjust. You may still be far, but you are not lost. That matters, because being far is not the same as being lost. Far means you need time, strategy, and effort. Lost means you do not know where the road is. Many people are not lazy, they are lost. They are surrounded by tips, predictions, products, influencers, and opinions, but they do not have a personal structure. So they consume financial content, the way someone in a desert drinks salt water. It feels like they are doing something, but it does not truly hydrate the plan. The solution is not more noise. It is a clearer framework. Know your life cost. Build margin. Increase surplus. Invest consistently. Manage risk. Avoid self-sabotage. Define partial freedom levels. Let time work. Adjust as life changes. That is not flashy, but it is strong. And strong matters more than flashy when you are building something that must support your life. Now we can move toward the close. Financial freedom is often described as the day you do not need to work. But maybe that definition is too narrow. Maybe financial freedom begins earlier. It begins the first time you do not have to panic. The first time you can say no. The first time you can wait. The first time your assets carry a meaningful part of your life. The first time a paycheck is still important, but no longer the entire foundation. The first time you realize your effort from past years is still standing beside you as capital. That is a profound moment. Because capital, at its best, is stored effort. Effort that did not vanish. Effort that did not become only consumption. Effort that became a tool, a shield, a bridge, a machine. And when that machine grows, your life changes. Not because you become someone else, but because the world has less immediate power over you. That is the real promise. Not easy money, not permanent vacation, not superiority, less dependence, more margin, better choices, more time, a quieter kind of strength. And maybe that is less glamorous than the fantasy, but it is more valuable. Because the fantasy says, one day I will escape. The real path says, every year I will become harder to trap. That is a different identity. And if you understand that, You stop treating investments like lottery tickets. You stop asking every asset to rescue you. You stop confusing income with freedom. You stop confusing lifestyle with progress. You stop confusing activity with construction. You start building. Deliberately, patiently, seriously, not perfectly. Perfect is not required, but direction is. And the direction is simple. Turn a growing portion of your work today into assets that can protect your life tomorrow. Do that long enough, intelligently enough, consistently enough, and your dependence begins to shrink. Maybe slowly, maybe unevenly, maybe with setbacks, but it shrinks. And that shrinking dependence is the beginning of freedom. So the final question is not only, how much money do you need to never work again? The deeper question is, what part of your life are you still forcing your paycheck to carry alone? Because that is where the work begins, not in the fantasy of never working, in the decision to stop leaving your entire future on one fragile pillar. If this made you uncomfortable, that may be useful. Comfortable financial content often entertains you. Uncomfortable financial content can reorganize you. And if you are the kind of person who wants more than motivation, if you want to actually understand the structure behind freedom, then this is the kind of conversation worth returning to. Because this was never just about quitting work. It was about building a life where work is no longer the only thing standing between you and collapse. And that is a very different goal. A more serious one. A more honest one. A more powerful one.